My daughter stopped speaking at age 7 after witnessing something traumatic. For 9 years, we communicated through notes. Yesterday, she spoke her first words. Thank you for waiting. I finally understood what happened that night. Sophie was 7 years old the night she stopped talking. Before that night, she never stopped. She was one of those kids who narrated their entire life in real time. Mom, I'm putting on my shoes now. Mom, this cereal tastes like cinnamon. Mom, did you know that butterflies taste with their feet? I learned that at school today. Can butterflies taste ice cream with their feet? What if we put ice cream on the ground for butterflies? Constant, beautiful, exhausting. I remember thinking, around her 6th birthday, that I'd give anything for 10 minutes of silence. Just 10 minutes without questions or observations or Sophie's stream of consciousness commentary on everything she saw, thought, or wondered about. I got 9 years of silence, and I would have given anything to hear her voice again. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. I woke up at 2:17 in the morning to the sound of breaking glass. Not loud, just a sharp crack followed by the tinkle of shards hitting the kitchen floor. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. Sophie's was downstairs at the back of the house. We'd converted the old den into her bedroom when she was 5 because she wanted to be able to see the backyard at night. Said it made her feel safe to watch the trees. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while I crept down the stairs. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The dispatcher told me to stay upstairs, to lock myself in a room until police arrived. But Sophie was down there, in that 1st-floor bedroom with the windows that faced the backyard. I went down anyway. The kitchen window was broken. Cold October air pouring through the hole where a pane used to be, glass on the floor. The back door was still locked from the inside. I checked every room on the 1st floor. Living room, bathroom, Sophie's room. The bedroom door was closed. I opened it slowly, terrified of what I'd find. Sophie was in her closet, sitting on the floor in her pajamas, the ones with the yellow ducks, knees pulled to her chest, eyes open, staring straight ahead at nothing. Sophie? I knelt in front of her. Baby, are you okay? She didn't answer, didn't even look at me, just kept staring at that fixed point in space. I checked her for injuries. No blood, no bruises, nothing. She was physically untouched, but something in her eyes was gone. That bright, curious spark that made Sophie had disappeared. The police arrived 4 minutes later. 2 officers searched the house and yard, found no signs of an intruder except the broken window, no footprints in the yard, no forced entry anywhere else. They theorized someone had broken the window, maybe planning to break in, but fled when they heard movement inside the house. Random attempted burglary. That's what the police report said. No suspect. Nothing stolen. Just a broken window and my daughter sitting in her closet, silent. The officers tried to talk to Sophie, asked if she saw anyone, if she heard anything. She didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge they were speaking to her. Just sat there on the closet floor, staring. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, crouched down to Sophie's level. Honey, you're safe now. Can you tell us what you saw? Nothing. I carried Sophie to my bed that night. She was 7, but she felt heavier than she should have, like fear had weight and it was pressing her down. She curled against me, still silent, and eventually fell asleep. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Sophie got up, got dressed, came to the kitchen for breakfast. Everything normal except she didn't say a word. Not good morning. Not what's for breakfast. Not can I watch cartoons. Nothing. Sophie, I kept my voice gentle. Do you want to talk about last night? She looked at me, then shook her head. No, at least she was responding. That was something. Are you okay? A pause, then a shrug. Maybe. I took her to the pediatrician that afternoon. Dr. Sanders had been Sophie's doctor since birth. He did a full examination, checked her throat, her vocal cords, everything. Physically, there's nothing wrong, he said, but I think you should see a specialist. The specialist was Dr. Ellen Park, a child psychiatrist who'd been practicing for 23 years. Her office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs and a whole shelf of toys designed to help kids express things they couldn't say out loud. Dr. Park spent an hour with Sophie in that first session. When she came out, she looked at me with the expression doctors get when they're about to deliver news no parent wants to hear. Sophie is experiencing selective mutism, she said. It's a trauma response. She's physically capable of speech, but psychologically, something is preventing her from speaking. Will it go away? Dr. Park sat down across from me. Sometimes, yes, with therapy and time and the right support, but there's no timeline I can give you. It could be weeks, it could be years, or, she paused, it could be permanent. The word permanent felt like a punch to the chest. What did she see? I asked. During the break-in, what happened that made her stop talking? Dr. Park shook her head. She won't tell me. I tried several approaches: drawing, play therapy, story dolls. She engages with everything except anything related to that night. When I ask direct questions, she shuts down completely. So we don't know what she saw. No, we don't. Over the next few months, we tried everything. Different therapists: art therapy, music therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Sophie participated in all of it. She'd draw pictures, play with therapy toys, even showed emotions, smiling at jokes or crying during sad stories, but she never spoke. Around month 3, Dr. Park gave me a notebook. Small, spiral-bound, fits in a pocket. Try written communication, she suggested. See if Sophie can express herself that way. That night, I gave Sophie the notebook and a pen. Wrote a question on the first page: "How are you feeling today?" Sophie looked at the notebook for a long time, then picked up the pen. Her handwriting was messy, the letters uneven like any 7-year-old's. She wrote, "Tired." It was the first real communication we'd had in 3 months. I started crying right there at the kitchen table. Sophie looked alarmed, wrote quickly, "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby. I'm just happy you're talking to me, even if it's writing." From that day forward, Sophie carried that notebook everywhere. To school, to therapy, to the grocery store. She wrote responses to questions, wrote observations about things she saw. Wrote "I love you, Mom" on random pages when she felt like it. I learned to read her emotions through her handwriting. When she was upset, the letters got small and cramped. When she was happy, they spread out, loopy and free. When she was scared, the pen pressed so hard it tore through the paper. School was difficult. The other kids in 2nd grade didn't understand why Sophie wouldn't talk. Some thought she was stuck up. Others thought she was weird. A few tried to be nice but got frustrated when she only wrote responses. The principal called me in after the first month. "Mrs. Anderson, we want to support Sophie, but this is disruptive to the classroom. The teacher can't wait for her to write every response. Maybe you should consider other options." I knew what she meant: special education, a different school, homeschooling. I gave it until the end of 2nd grade. By then, Sophie was coming home with her notebooks torn up. Kids had started grabbing them out of her hands, tossing them across the cafeteria, reading her private thoughts out loud to make fun of her. One day she came home with a note someone had written on her forehead in marker: "Freak." I made the decision to homeschool her after that. Sophie cried when I told her, tears streaming down her silent face while she wrote, "I'm sorry I'm broken." I grabbed the notebook from her hands and wrote back in big letters, "You are not broken. You are healing. And I will wait as long as it takes." The years passed in the strange new normal. Sophie thrived academically with homeschooling. She was brilliant, especially in writing and art. Her notebooks filled with stories and observations and thoughts about the world that she couldn't speak, but could articulate perfectly on paper. We developed a shorthand. Instead of writing full responses, Sophie would use single letters for common phrases: H for hungry, T for tired, S for sad, Q for question. We added emojis for emotions: a smiley face for happy, a storm cloud for upset, a heart for I love you. Sometimes people asked me if I'd given up on Sophie ever speaking again. The answer was always no. I never gave up. But I also learned to love this version of communication. The written word forced us both to be more thoughtful, more intentional. Every conversation was documented. I have boxes of Sophie's notebooks in the garage, years of her inner life preserved in pen and ink. When Sophie was 11, she wrote her first joke. We were making dinner together and she was cutting vegetables. She wrote on a scrap of paper, "Why did the tomato turn red?" "I don't know. Why?" "Because it saw the salad dressing." It was terrible, absolutely terrible. The kind of joke that would have made me groan under normal circumstances. But I laughed until I cried. Because Sophie had made a joke, had engaged in wordplay, had shown that even in silence, she still had joy. At 13, Sophie asked to go back to regular school. Wrote in her notebook, "I want to try again. I'm stronger now." "Are you sure?" She nodded, drew a little emoji with a determined face. We found a progressive high school that was willing to accommodate her communication needs. Teachers let her write responses instead of speaking in class. She took written exams. For presentations, she created detailed slideshow presentations with text and let the teacher read her notes aloud. It wasn't perfect. Some kids still thought she was weird, but she found a small group of friends who accepted her, who learned to read her notes and include her in conversations, who texted with her constantly and made plans and treated her like any other teenager. Sophie wrote to me one night, sophomore year, "Sometimes I try to speak. The words get stuck in my throat. Like there's a wall between my brain and my mouth. I can hear the words in my head, but they won't come out. I'll wait as long as it takes, I wrote back. Same thing I'd been saying for 9 years. When Sophie was 16, she started applying to colleges. Her grades were exceptional. Perfect GPA, SAT scores in the 99th percentile, extracurriculars in art club, online debate team, volunteer work at the library. But the application essays were what set her apart. She wrote about living without a voice, about learning to communicate through notes and gestures and written words, about how losing her voice taught her that words aren't the only way to speak. That presence matters. That listening matters. That sometimes the most powerful communication happens in silence. She titled it, The Language of Silence. I read it and cried for 20 minutes straight. Sophie got accepted to every school she applied to, chose a prestigious university in our state with a full scholarship and a detailed accommodation plan. She could type responses on her laptop during class discussions, take written exams, email professors instead of attending office hours. She was going to college. My silent daughter, who'd spent 9 years writing instead of speaking, was going to study English literature and creative writing at one of the best schools in the country. The night before she left for freshman year, Sophie wrote me a long letter, longer than usual. Pages and pages of small, careful handwriting. Mom, I know you've wondered what happened that night. I know you've wanted to ask. I've seen the question in your eyes 1,000 times over 9 years, but I couldn't remember. Not really, just fragments, a shadow, a feeling of fear so big it swallowed my voice. But lately, pieces are coming back, and I think I'm ready to remember. I think I need to remember. Because this silence has protected me for 9 years, but I don't want to carry it forever. Thank you for never pushing, for waiting, for learning my language instead of forcing me back into yours. I love you, Sophie. She left for college the next day. I hugged her for a long time at the dorm, not wanting to let go. She pulled away eventually, gave me a small smile, and walked into her new life. Thanksgiving break, she came home. We made turkey together, our traditional meal. Sophie was quieter than usual, if that was even possible. Her notes were shorter, less frequent. She seemed distracted. Finally, over pumpkin pie, she slid her notebook across the table. I've been thinking about that night. My stomach clenched. Okay, what if I tell you it wasn't a stranger? I read the sentence 3 times. What do you mean? The man who came to my window, I knew him. The room felt too small suddenly. Who was it, baby? Sophie's hand shook as she wrote. She crossed out words, started over. Finally wrote, I need time to remember more, but it wasn't a break-in. Not really. Over winter break, Sophie started writing more about that night. Fragments at first, scattered pieces that didn't make sense together. Someone visited that afternoon, made me uncomfortable. He touched my hair weird. Said I was pretty. I told him I didn't like it. He laughed. That night, I heard my window open. I was awake. I saw him climb in. Each note felt like a punch. Someone Sophie knew had climbed through her window at 2 in the morning. Someone who'd made her uncomfortable earlier that day. On Christmas Eve, Sophie wrote the name, Uncle Mark, my brother Mark, who'd been 32 years old at the time, who'd visited that afternoon for coffee. Who I'd thought was just being an attentive uncle when he spent time talking to Sophie about school and friends and her favorite books. The broken window wasn't from someone trying to break in. It was from someone leaving. Mark had climbed through Sophie's window to talk to her, and in his panic to get out when he heard me coming downstairs, he'd knocked over something that shattered the kitchen window. Sophie wrote everything. How Mark had come into her room that night. How she'd been awake, frozen in fear. How he'd sat on her bed and apologized for making her uncomfortable earlier. Said he just wanted to make sure she was okay. To make sure she understood, he didn't mean anything inappropriate by complimenting her. He kept saying, don't tell anyone about this. They wouldn't understand. They'd think something bad happened when I was just checking on you. Sophie wrote, I screamed in my head but no sound came out, and after he left, after you found me, the sound was just gone. Like that night swallowed it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My brother had traumatized my daughter into 9 years of silence because he'd climbed through her window at 2 in the morning to what? Apologize? Make himself feel better? I called Mark that night. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice cheerful. Hey sis, Merry Christmas. You came into Sophie's room that night. Silence, long and damning. What? The night of the break-in, you climbed through Sophie's window. More silence. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Sophie remembers, Mark. She's been writing it all down. You came into her room at 2 in the morning. You told her not to tell anyone. His breathing changed, became faster. I wanted to apologize. She looked so uncomfortable that afternoon and I couldn't sleep. I needed to make sure she knew I didn't mean anything weird. So you climbed through a 7-year-old's window in the middle of the night? I knocked on the door first, but you didn't hear me. I didn't want to wake you up. I just went around to her window and traumatized her so badly she hasn't spoken in 9 years. The silence this time was different, heavier. I could hear when it hit him, when he understood what he'd done. Oh God, his voice cracked. Oh God, I didn't mean. I never thought. You destroyed her voice. You took my daughter's voice because you needed to feel better about making her uncomfortable. And then you let us think it was a random break-in. You let her suffer for 9 years. I didn't know. His voice was barely a whisper. I swear I didn't know it affected her like that. I thought she just didn't see me. I climbed back out, knocked something over in the kitchen by accident, ran to my car. I thought no one knew I was ever there. Stay away from us. I couldn't listen anymore. Don't call, don't visit, don't contact Sophie, ever, you're dead to us. I hung up. Sophie was standing in the kitchen doorway. She'd heard everything. Tears were streaming down her face. She wrote quickly in her notebook, hands shaking, "Thank you." We started a new kind of therapy after that. Sophie saw Dr. Reeves, a specialist in trauma recovery who focused specifically on that night. Now that Sophie remembered what happened, could articulate the source of her fear, they could address it directly. The progress was slow, glacial, but it was happening. 2 months into therapy, Dr. Reeves called me. Sophie made a sound today, not a word, just a hum, but it was intentional. She chose to make noise. I cried in my car in the parking lot. A month after that, Sophie whispered to me during breakfast, just one word. Hi, barely audible, her voice rusty from years of disuse, but it was there. I whispered back. Hi, baby. She smiled. Over the next few months, Sophie practiced speaking alone in her room. I'd hear her through the door talking to herself, reading passages from books aloud, singing lyrics to songs. Her voice sounded different than it had at 7. Deeper, unfamiliar, but beautiful. She wasn't ready to speak to anyone else yet, just me, and only sometimes. Most of our communication was still through notes, but the wall was cracking. Yesterday was the first day of Sophie's spring semester, sophomore year of college. She came home for the weekend to drop off some boxes before heading back to campus. We made lasagna together, her favorite, garlic bread, Caesar salad, chocolate cake for dessert. I put the cake on the table, started to light a candle just because, even though it wasn't her birthday. Sophie looked at me intently. Her expression was different, determined. I paused with the lighter in my hand. Sophie opened her mouth. I expected her to lean forward and blow out the candle. Instead, words came out. Thank you for waiting. Her voice was clear, strong, beautiful. 4 words that held 9 years of silence. I collapsed into the chair next to her, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Sophie kept talking. I stayed quiet because speaking meant remembering, but you never gave up on me. You learned my language. You waited for me to be ready. She stood up and hugged me while I sobbed into her shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time. Her voice, once lost, now returned. Sophie doesn't talk all the time now. Some days she still prefers notes. Some days the words come easily. She says her voice is like a muscle she's rebuilding. It gets tired, needs rest, but she's speaking. We filed a police report about Mark. The statute of limitations had passed for any criminal charges, but we wanted it documented, wanted a record. Mark sent 1 email apologizing. Sophie deleted it without reading. We got a restraining order instead. Mark is legally forbidden from contacting either of us. He's not allowed within 500 feet of our home or Sophie's campus. Sophie wrote 1 final note last week. Put it in an envelope and handed it to me at breakfast. Inside, I don't need these anymore, but I'm keeping them all, every notebook, every scrap of paper, because they're proof that losing my voice didn't mean I had nothing to say. And they're proof that you heard me anyway. We volunteer together now at a center for traumatized children. Sophie works with kids who have gone through things they can't talk about. She shows them her notebooks, teaches them that silence doesn't mean you're broken. That healing happens at its own pace. Last week, a 6-year-old girl who hadn't spoken in 3 months after witnessing domestic violence wrote her first note during Sophie's session. Just 2 words, "I'm scared." Sophie wrote back, "Me too sometimes, but we're going to be okay." People ask me sometimes how I stayed patient for 9 years. How I never gave up on Sophie speaking again. The truth is, I didn't see it as waiting. I saw it as listening, just in a different language. Sophie didn't lose her voice that night. She was protecting it, keeping it safe until she was strong enough to use it again. And when she was ready, when she finally felt safe enough to let sound pass through her lips, the first thing she said was thank you. Not I'm sorry, not it's over, but thank you. For waiting, for hearing her even in silence, for learning to speak her language instead of forcing her back into mine. That's what love is, meeting people where they are, speaking their language, waiting as long as it takes. Sophie sang in the shower this morning. Off-key and joyful and loud. I stood outside the bathroom door and listened. To the voice I thought I'd never hear again. The voice that was always there, just waiting for the right moment to come home. Thanks for listening. Drop a like if this one hit you.